Hey guys, Constance here at Good Life Farm. So today I am actually making a recipe for Mr. Smith. This is a baked good recipe, but it's not paleo. It does have sugar in it. Not a ton of sugar, but a little bit of sugar. And that is for lemon scones. This recipe is one I actually came up with years ago. Back before we moved to Alaska, my older son had a love for lemon scones that we used to get at a coffee shop in North Carolina. And when we moved up to Alaska, of course we couldn't go there anymore, and he asked me one day if I could make lemon scones that were like theirs. And so I came up with my own version of lemon scones, and he actually liked them better than the ones from the coffee shop. So that is the recipe that I'm going to share with you today. These are mini scones, so they're almost bite-sized, not quite, but a couple bites, and super easy to make, and so I'm going to show you how to do it. Oh, and preheat your oven to 425 degrees. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out my dry ingredients. I've got some all-purpose flour here. I'm going to need 2 cups of all-purpose flour, and I personally always use an unbleached variety. And then we're going to add 2 tablespoons of flour as well, because the 2 cups is not quite enough. So 2 cups plus 2 tablespoons. Next I'm going to add in a tablespoon of baking powder. And we're going to add in 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. And then we need 3 tablespoons of sugar, granulated sugar. And give it all a quick stir. Oop. Now I'm going to need some cold butter. I'm going to need 6 tablespoons of cold unsalted butter. I'll need another half a teaspoon or half a tablespoon later on, but I only need 6 tablespoons at the moment. Alright, so I'm going to take my 6 tablespoons of butter here, and I'm just going to kind of cut them into really thin slices and drop them into my flour mixture. And I do this because it just makes it much easier to cut the butter into the flour later. If you wanted to, you could actually freeze this butter and grate it. That's another option, but this is just how I do it. So now I'm going to take my pastry blender and I'm going to cut the butter into the flour mixture until it's just kind of crumbly and there's no bits of butter that are bigger than, say, a pea. So I'm going to set this aside for a little bit, and I'm going to work on some lemons. I'm going to need 1 or 2 lemons. It just depends on how juicy your lemons are, how big they are. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to zest this lemon. I'm going to need a tablespoon of fresh zest for the scones. All right. So there's about a tablespoon of lemon zest. I'm going to drop this into my flour mixture. Just gonna stir that in. Make sure it breaks up and doesn't stick together into a big clump. Whew, that smells so good. All right, now I'm not done with this lemon yet, but I don't need it for the scones. I'm going to need this for the glaze that we whip together after the scones have baked. So I'm going to set that aside for now. So I'm going to measure out 1 cup of half and half. And then to my half and half, I'm going to add some vanilla extract. We're going to put in a tablespoon, because these scones are kind of like a vanilla cream lemon flavor. Right? Now, I'm going to grab my dry goods. And I'm grabbing my spoonula here, and I'm going to pour my vanilla and half mixture into this, and I'm just going to stir it until it just comes together. Okay, so now I am going to flour my surface here, and I'm going to get ready to shape my scones. So now I'm going to turn the dough out onto my floured surface. I'm going to pat it into a square that's about 3/4 of an inch thick and about 8 inches or so on a side. I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of flour on top just so that it doesn't stick to me. All right, so now I'm going to cut my square of dough into the scones, and I will place them on my baking stone, or you could also use a baking sheet, and I have it lined with parchment paper just because I find it easier to clean and nothing ever sticks to the parchment paper. So I'm going to take my little dough blade here. You can use any knife really. Butter knife will work too. I just like using this because I can cut straight down. And I'm going to first cut into 9 squares like I'm doing a tic-tac-toe board. That's a little crooked, but that's okay. And then we'll cut again. And you can flour that blade a little bit if it's sticking some. Now I'm going to take each one of these and I'm going to cut them diagonally into a triangular scone and transfer them to my baking stone. Alright, so now I'm going to take another little bit of butter, about a half a tablespoon of this, and I'm going to cut it into tiny little bits, and I'm going to put one little bit on top of each scone. Alright, so my scones baked in the oven at 425 degrees for, they usually take like 10 to 12 minutes, and you just want to bake them until you just start seeing little gold areas on the scones. You don't want them to be totally golden brown, but just kissed with golden spots. And so I took the scones and I transferred them over to a rack to begin cooling. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make my lemon glaze that goes over the top of them. It's super easy. Now the parchment paper that I had on my baking stone, I'm going to use this. I'm actually going to slide it under my cooling rack because when I drizzle the glaze all over the scones, that will catch the drips and then I don't have a bunch of mess to clean up. We'll kind of scooch these together a little bit closer. All right. So I'm going to take the lemon. Let me adjust this here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to juice this. So I'm going to measure out 1 cup of powdered sugar. This is not something I use very often, so it's kind of double bagged here. And it doesn't have to be precise, you just want it to be about a cup there. And to this, I'm going to add a tablespoon. Now I'm going to add a tablespoon of vanilla extract. I'm going to grab my little whisk here, and I'm going to add in a tablespoon of the lemon juice. That was a little scant there. And I'm just going to whisk this all together. Now if you need a little bit more liquid, just add a little bit more lemon juice, just a tiny little bit at a time. But basically you want to just get this to a consistency that you can drizzle it onto your scones. Drizzle it or brush it. I'm actually going to use my silicone brush and just brush it across the tops of the scones. So that is nice and smooth. And then we just brush it on. And I do this while my scones are still warm because it helps the glaze kind of spread out. Alright, and there you go. That is how you make my mini lemon cream scones. As you saw, they're super simple to make, and you can actually make an orange version of these as well by simply using orange zest and orange juice in place of the lemon. So if you would like to make this recipe, I have a printable version of it on my website, and I will put a link to that down below. So thanks for joining me here again in the Homestead Kitchen. My name is Constance at Good Life Farm, and I'll talk to y'all next time.